Hello everybody, and welcome to this digital salon brought to you by the Global Perspectives Initiative. My name is Christine Mundwa, and I am your host today. Today we're talking about stronger economies, and we're talking about stronger women. We're looking specifically at including more women in financial services spaces on the African continent. Of course, we're having this conversation at a time where people are engaged around the world. Policymakers are thinking about how to foster economic recovery post the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, there are certain industries that we've identified as catalysts to that economic recovery. But there is also a major demographic of the world population that needs to be brought in to the financial services space, women specifically, and women in sub-Saharan Africa, in fact, in all of Africa, are a big component of the African economy, as we will be learning today. And of course, their financial inclusion is important. So we're gathered about that today. So I just wanted to tell you that this particular event is happening on the sidelines of the Generation Equality Forum that's taking place in Mexico as we speak. In fact, it is in its second day. And there, of course, there are ambitious investment policies that are being discussed to accelerate equality, leadership, and opportunity for women and girls worldwide. So we'll post something in the chat forum, a link so that you can also have a look about what's going on in Mexico at the Generation Equality Forum. Of course, that is an initiative that is being spearheaded by the French government and the Mexican government. And as I say, they are in day 2. And this event, also brought to you in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is a sideline event to that. So as I was saying, we are talking about including women in this space. And as we're going to learn throughout this conversation, there is a lot of economic activity in the hands of women on the African continent. It is just about bringing them into the space where, of course, decisions, amongst other things, are being made. So I will be introducing you to the panel that I will be speaking to very briefly. But before I do that, I want to hand over to Ingrid Hum from the Global Perspective Initiative. She's got some opening remarks for that, and then we will proceed with the event. So Ingrid, over to you right now.
Thank you very much, Christine, and a very warm welcome to all who join us today. You know, financial inclusion is definitely the basis of all development, and financial inclusion is an economic necessity. But in sub-Saharan Africa, only 20% of the population has a bank account. And financial inclusion is especially an issue of gender. It's an issue of women. Women are the economic backbone of Africa, especially in small and medium-sized businesses. But women make up the global unbanked majority. So without financial equality, there is no self-determination and there is no equality realized. So we need financial inclusion. Today, the key to financial inclusion seems to be the digitalization, and digital financial services are one of Africa's big success stories. So there is some light in this direction. That's why Melinda Gates stated very recently, women will have outsized impact on economy, but of course we need to have some engaged, and we have to include some in the financial part of economy. We as Global Perspectives are very happy to cooperate with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in our program line, Strong Women, Strong Economies. This is our second salon, and we will have 2 more events until November. And our long-lasting partner, the Gates Foundation, is very deeply engaged in the Gender Equality Forum that takes place in Mexico today. And Melinda herself is seeking very much for gender equality and economic empowerment of women. Now we are very honored to open the floor first to our State Secretary for Digitalization, Dorothy Baer, who will be introduced first by our marvelous moderator, Christine. So I take back to you, Christine.
Thank you for that, Ingrid. And you're quite right. This is the perfect segue. You heard Ingrid talk about digitalization there. And our keynote speaker today is coming from the Minister of State for Digitization at the Federal Chancellery here in Germany. That is Dorothee Bär with the keynote for this event. I'll hand you over to her now.
Dear Dr. Hamm, dear Ms. Mundwa, dear ladies and gentlemen. The financial inclusion of women does not only have the potential to transform a woman's life, but to transform a whole society. We know that women reinvest up to 90% of their income in the education, health and nutrition of their family and their community, compared to up to 40% for men. Therefore, what advances a family is the possibility for women to create reserves, to make investments, to transfer money and to protect themselves against health or climate risks. The prerequisite for that is women's access to financial services. A fair and a transparent provision of saving schemes, microloans and insurance provides a family with the means to pay for purchases, education and healthcare. Entrepreneurs are able to obtain the capital required to create jobs, income and prospects for the future. Thus, financial inclusion is a crucial stepping stone towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. However, much work needs to be done to achieve gender equality in financial services because women still make up the lion's share of the world's unbanked. But we cannot achieve this alone. Therefore, Germany is part of many multilateral initiatives aiming at closing the gap on financial inclusion and support women entrepreneurs. The G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion, the G20 Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative, and the African Development Bank's Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa are just a few examples. In addition to multilateral initiatives, technology is a game changer. The IMF has concluded that fintech is contributing towards closing gender gaps in financial inclusion, increasing financial inclusion in general, and being associated with higher GDP growth. Digital financial services are faster, more efficient, and usually cheaper than traditional financial services. That is why digital services reach lower income households and micro or small and medium-sized enterprises. Digital financial services have expanded opportunities for millions of women across the globe. Only within the last 6 years, over 240 million additional women now have an account with a financial institution or a mobile money service. And as we have all experienced, the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated how important access to the internet and digital services is. We have seen that digital financial services have enabled contactless and cashless transactions. Digital financial services have also aided the governments of Namibia, Uganda, Peru, and many other countries to arrange financial support to people and enterprises. But the existence of digital financial services does not automatically translate to increased digital financial inclusion for women. Women's digital literacy, their access to mobile phones and the internet, the requirements of identification documents and gender-related social norms are major obstacles for women. This means if we do not address these issues, we will not be able to make use of the potential that digital financial services hold. Let me give you an example. We are supporting the Tunisian government and the private sector to improve digital financial services for women and in rural areas. That includes financial literacy trainings, advising on the development, but also the legal framework of digital financial services, so that, for example, consumer rights are protected when using mobile loans. This project enables more than 10,000 Tunisian women. This is why a public-private dialogue is so important. The individual challenges that vulnerable persons face must be included in the design of products and in services. We foster this public-private dialogue also on the European level. As many of you know, digital transformation plays a key role in the EU-Africa strategy. This also includes specific policies to ensure digital inclusion for women and marginalized groups. And to support the digital transformation in Africa, just 3 months ago, our German Chancellor Angela Merkel, the President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, and many others have launched the Digital for Development Hub. But Africa's digital transformation will be delayed if we do not manage to mitigate the economic and social consequences of the pandemic. It is clear we cannot go back to business as usual. There will be no building back better if we fail to empower women economically. So I wish you now all the best, and greetings from me from the German Chancellery, yours, Dorothee Bär.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm so thrilled. Again, I just want to welcome some people in our audience. I know that we have representatives from various organizations. I have it on good authority that we've got people from the embassy here, the French embassy here, the embassies of Sierra Leone, Botswana, Angola, here in Berlin, and various other foreign missions. Representatives from different ministries here in Germany, including the Ministry of Economic Cooperation, the Foreign Office here as well, of course from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, IOM, Open Society, International Rescue Committee. So we're in very good company, and I can already see the chat function is active already. I would like to encourage you all in our audience, please filter through your questions, your comments through the Q&A function, and I will be relaying that to the panelists throughout the conversation. So don't hold back. I can see already one of our ladies joining us from Egypt has a lot to say already, and we'll be touching on those points. Absolutely correct there, Hannah. Thrilled to have you in the company. So at this time, I would like to introduce to you our esteemed panelists, and we're going to be learning from them today. Firstly, I will go with you, Mary Ellen Iskenderian, who's joining us from the US. She is President and Chief Executive Officer of Women's World Banking. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the UN's Business and Sustainable Development Commission. Good to have you, Mary Ellen, and looking forward to your insights. Shefa Okore is joining us from Nairobi. She's Senior Strategy and Policy Advisor, advisory member to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Goalkeepers Initiative, as well as the Obama Foundation's Africa Leader. Did you see President Obama posting about his grandma who passed away recently, and he talked about the industrious woman that she was as well, and how she kept the household going. So definitely that voice coming to us from Nairobi. Looking forward to your contributions there, Shefa. And then, of course, Dr. Christina Teves Grado, who is here with us in Germany. She is founder and managing director of Endeavor. She's also a former strategy consultant at McKinsey and research fellow at the CSR initiative of the Harvard Kennedy School. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us have this conversation now. And you know, Shefa, I want to pick up with you because we're talking about women, and we're going to be looking at the numbers in terms of the stats. We've had a little bit of the global picture of the extent to which women in the world are sort of on an unequal footing when it comes to the financial world. But when I think about the women that we're speaking of, right, we're talking about women who are industrious, Shefa. I think of my grandmother, who was a market trader. And Granny's business was really, she went to work every single day. What she did is she sold ornaments and pieces of art that artists had made. And she, being able to speak English and communicate to foreign tourists that visited Harare. And so she would sell, of course, these items at a cost. And that's how she kept the household going. She was able to make sure my mothers and her siblings had school uniforms, that the house was stocked. Of course, my grandpa had his job, but she was really the entrepreneur. But I think about the fact that Granny went to work every single day, but didn't even have a pension at the end of it all. And that is what we're talking about when we speak about financial exclusion. We're talking about women who are working every single day, saving money in other ways. It's just not being captured in the formal spaces, so to say. But this is what financial exclusion is to me. And Shefa, perhaps you open us up there as well and tell us, who are we talking about when we're talking about women in Africa who are financially excluded, if we can say that?
Thank you. I think that is a fantastic way to start this conversation, to just remind us that that women have always been industrious and entrepreneurial. They just didn't call themselves entrepreneurs because it's a big English word, right? So like your grandmother, my grandmother was one of those women who sold everything. I remember my grandfather saying, if she could sell all her children, all of you would have been sold. People would have bought you because she had such a wonderful way of convincing you to buy everything and anything in her household, right? But like your grandmother, mine as well couldn't open an account until my grandfather was present, until my grandfather approved. It was always up to somebody else making sure that the doors were open for women, and not just women, and not women themselves, and that is a problem. So when you talk about digitalization and financial inclusions particularly, we are talking about the women that are constantly not visible. Women that are constantly, because of class, because of their age, because of the work they do, which is informal and not structured, because it is low skilled, because it is not seen as viable business that can run bigger economies and big businesses, and that's not valued in terms of investing in, as not worthy of being included, right? And they are there and they run economies and they're everywhere. So it is not just your grandmother, it is all of our grandmothers. If you look back very keenly, you find that they've always been there, doing one thing or another to put money on the table, to put food on the table, to feed and fend. And if you grew up like me in a big, large African family, there were always cousins we didn't know how we related to who are being fed, who are being taken to school. And there was always money to feed them and to take them to school and to make sure everybody had something. So we are particularly talking about the women we are still, even today, not capturing in text, not seeing in practice, not building structures for, not going where they are so we can understand them and find out how to get to include them. So those are the women.
Thank you so much for that, Shefa. And Mary Ellen, I want to bring you into the conversation right now. You obviously have the global picture, but we're zeroing in particularly on this continent. And what are the barriers women are facing to financial inclusion today?
Well, I think the opening remarks from the Federal Chancellery, Madame Barr, really hit a lot of them right on the head. And I love Schaefer's idea of invisibility, because we see, and I think this will be a theme throughout our panel, that regulators don't require, financial service providers don't collect, or if they collect, they don't use gender disaggregated data. And if you don't know what, either from the demand side, what your clients need, or from the supply side, what the clients are that are you're using products and services, how are you going to design them? How are you going to figure out what policies, what policy levers are really going to make a difference? And, we just have seen in so many instances, and I, love to talk about this throughout the morning, that, financial service providers are really leaving money on the table by assuming they know what is going to work for women, which is typically they're defaulting to whatever the product is that works for men, rather than finding out who their women clients are and then what works for them, and then designing around that. You typically don't need a separate product. You don't need a separate policy, but you need to make sure that the messaging or some of the attributes or the referrals or some element of the way it's sold or packaged is suitable for them and really meets their needs.
Right. Christina, I was going to come to you, but I do want to come back to Schaefer, because one of the things in the African context as well appears to be like you talked about, invisibility. A lot of people, a lot of women on the continent don't have a bank account. And one of the reasons they cite is not having a national identity document.
Yes, and it's beyond just identity documents, because if you look at the structures within which women are supposed to apply for this documentation that they're supposed to use to identify themselves, these documentations are literally very, very complex for them to understand, and then the process is tedious. So then without understanding the context within which women exist within these countries, it's impossible to understand why they're not even having these IDs and saying, oh my God, I'm not even going to put myself through this process, right? So one, you will find that the person who's supposed to help you do the initial, and there's documentation in every ward. And I will use Kenya, for example, just for context. So because we have devolved systems of government, devolved system of government allows for the people to be able to access services at their nearest representative office. So we have in the lowest rank, we have a ward representative. So the ward representative is connected to a regional, like a local chief. Most of these chiefs behave like they own, let me tell you, it's like they run a little mill on the side where they mint gold and everything. They are so hard to find, and because of bureaucracy. So then you find a woman who has to do the caregiving in their home. This woman who already does not have the permission to leave their house to go and run a business is trying to track down this chief who is not going to be available, because he also only just listens to men and is available only for men, for her to get the fast papers, right? And when she gets these papers are written in English. And not most of the people in Kenya. Kenya is a very diverse country. I think we speak over 40-something languages, right? And English is not our first language. Swahili is our language. And even our documentation is written in English. So then they struggle. And then it's just like, why am I wasting time doing this when I can run my business in my own? I can make my little money and still take care of my family. So already you will see that the bureaucracies that still exist that are upheld by not just national, state, and operational levels make it impossible for women to acquire the documentation, right? And then even when they have this documentation and they take it to the bank and say, finally, I've met the chief, I have my documentation, I'm ready, give me my account. And then the first thing on the document in the bank is, who is your husband? Where's your husband's identity number? How many children do you have? There's so much bureaucracy, and that's the problem, right? That we should just stop creating everything or anything in terms of actual bureaucracies, and then just figure out how do we lessen the burden of making it affordable, accessible, and easier to process things for women who are already too vulnerable and are continually being marginalized by just too many processes. So there's structural issues, there's literacy issues, and when you talk about literacy, it's also understanding that not being able to speak English doesn't mean you're illiterate, because these women are already running businesses, they're already running households, right? They're already saving money amongst themselves. So it's the illiteracy that's being brought by structures that are included on top of what exists for them. So it becomes very difficult.
Absolutely. And Christine, I want to bring you into this conversation because, as Mary Ellen was talking about as well, some of the products that financial services providers offer somehow miss. I mean, she's talking about leaving money on the table, basically. And doesn't that have to do with the representation in these institutions, as Mary Ellen was alluding to? Christina, just unmute yourself over there. First one. Okay.
Classic. No, I think Mary Ellen, you made a very critical point is how do we design these products, no? And that's what we see a lot. So what I can bring into this conversation here is, I think, what financial inclusion means for women and in their role in inclusive businesses. How can they engage in the market for goods and services, but also how can they interact as entrepreneurs or producers? And actually in the inclusive business field, we see that a lot, that services are designed for women, but not with women, and not acknowledging the complexity that Schäfer has also pointed out of the various structures that hold women back. So it's not just a matter of financial inclusion. They also have a lot of different tasks at home, and I love your stories of your grandmothers, of, you know, they have to be the entrepreneurs, but they also take care of children and grandchildren and the household, and so there's this whole complexity of being a woman, and then adding another empowerment mechanism doesn't necessarily help. Sometimes it's simply overburdening, and that's why we really have to design financial access products, but any kind of business with women, really from the perspective of these women, and taking them seriously as we design these solutions. And one example that was really striking for me, it's not from Africa, but from Pakistan. There was a very well-intended initiative to empower women and give them access to income as in the dairy value chain. And the idea was, okay, women now are empowered through having cows and they sell the milk. We can take it a step further, and they can collect milk and, you know, go around the village in motorcycles and collect milk and have that role as well. But this is in the context of rural Pakistan. It was, you know, completely unthinkable that women would go around the village by themselves on a motorcycle. And that's not what empowerment means. If you then get that experience of failure when you're given a task that you can impossibly handle. So I think it's really, really important in everything we do for women that we do it with women.
Absolutely. And, you know, talking about examples, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the mobile money services that are being used across the continent. One of them, I'm going to ask Schäfer to tell us a little bit more about it, and Mariel, if you can chip in there as well, M-Pesa. And this is basically, well, I'm not going to tell you what M-Pesa does, because there are better people to do that than me. But what M-Pesa did is, more than 180,000 women. I want you to get this. 180,000 women. Once they were now able to this is not now. It's not mobile banking, but it's transacting via your mobile operator. So the bank isn't involved in any of this. So women who now had access and were transacting, this is specifically in Kenya, Shefa, these were small scale, well, actually, these were women working in agriculture, working on the farms. And once they had access to this mobile money, so to say, 185,000 of them actually became small scale retailers as a result, because they realized we don't have to be limited to what we're doing here on the farm, but we can actually take that and we can start trading just by creating that platform. So you can see how it's translating. It's not just saying we're giving a bunch of women bank accounts, but you see how somebody transforms basically from production with their hands on the farm, and then of course becoming a small scale retailer as a result of just allowing that access. So Shefa, tell us a little bit more about what you know about how that mobile money penetration has been really helpful in closing the divide, or closing the gap, so to say.
Thank you. I think M-Pesa has been revolutionary in many ways, because M-Pesa, and it's a product of Safaricom, which is one of the leading network service providers in Kenya. And the reason why they've been revolutionary is because they realized there was a need, and the need was so glaring and it couldn't be ignored anymore, that the number of unbanked women who are doing work in the informal sector, so the women we're talking about who are invisible within the structures of how economies are run, or within the GDP conversation, because when we talk about GDP, we lump everybody together and we say, oh my God, Kenya is doing fantastic, 4.5% GDP growth. But then when we talk of GDP per capita, where we're now dealing with individuals and how individual households are faring, then we start finding numbers and numbers that are shocking, right? So they realized that a lot of these women who are doing work, particularly the example that you gave, which is a very good one, women in agriculture, who are the ones who till the land. They plant in tea plantations, in coffee farms, in sugarcane farms, in rice farms. They're basically the ones who feed the entire country. They're the ones who till the land, prepare it, plant it, look after it, weed it, figure out how to take it and sell it to government, figure out how to negotiate and everything. But these are the women who don't have bank accounts. Why? They're women. Number two, they don't have husbands who are lucid enough to support and conscious enough to understand that these are the people who've already been holding on to this business. So we need to support them. So you'd find that there's always a big problem when it's harvest time and women have taken their cereals and then they've sold it to government, and then the money needs to be transferred back to them, and then it goes back to the men's account. And what happens? It's a crisis. The men go into the little towns, they move from their homes, and they drink all the money. Then women are left in poverty, and these are real life stories, right? Of women who are the working poor. No matter how much they work, they're stuck in this circle where they're constantly working, but they can't access the money because government will not come and say, hey, Christine, this is your money in your hand, thank you, bye, right? It needs to be transferred. So M-Pesa clearly just said, wait, there are all of these women who are doing hard work. They need a place where they can find dignity. And I think that's the one thing that we do when we start creating programs, when we start creating structures, when we start creating products that work for women, right? Giving them the dignity to be able to save, and save at their own pleasure, within the convenience of their own homes, within the convenience of their own time, so they don't have to leave whatever they're doing to go hundreds of miles looking for a place to get an ID, to get a banking statement, all of these things. And then number two, what M-Pesa did is make it easier and safer to move money. So you're basically walking around with your phone, with your SIM card in it, and that's your SIM card that has the money somehow in it, right? I'm not a techie person, but I enjoy M-Pesa because I know my money is always in my phone without actually having money. So it's safer now for women, It's easier to get people to invest in your businesses now because M-Pesa now has statements that can show how much she's been saving, how good she's been doing with her profits and incomes and where she's investing in. So there's like a trace of what she's been doing with her money without the hustle, without the hierarchy, without all the subjugation that existed in the previous systems that didn't understand why women needed to have a place for them to save, And I think that's one of the things in policy right now where we all need to understand the complex and the context of where women exist and where inequality exists, because financial injustice doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within systems that still refuse to see that not everybody should be going to a bank. Like, you should have an option. If you feel like a bank is not my thing, I can say, yeah, that's great, but I can do my money banking and saving on my phone. If I feel like there's another way in which I can do this, there needs to be those options. So M-Pesa has done many wonderful things for women. And I think even just myself, as someone who now travels out of Kenya, the one thing I do is suffer when I leave and I'm just like, oh my God, they don't have M-Pesa in the UK. What will I do with my life? Because all my money is always in my phone, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way in which you can see what progressive, gender-focused programs, products, and innovation can look like and can do for the majority of people who are working but are never really recognized.
Yeah. And I guess, for the benefit of those who might not be familiar, I mean, we keep saying M-Pesa, there are various others offering similar services, but it really started there with M-Pesa and Safaricom in Kenya. And it's been duplicated across the continent. It's taking up in the West as well, in Central Africa, as a solution. Mary Ellen, I just wondered when you see that, right, from where you sit, when you see what's happening with mobile money, what are you thinking in terms of how we can further exploit what is a very sort of contextual solution, right? I mean, I'm not sure that you bring that solution to Germany, a banking economy, where of course it's needed, but of course in our context, and you can hear from the case that Chef has made, how we can use this to do what we need to do on the continent.
Well, I think Schaefer gave a beautiful description of how it works and just how ubiquitous it's come. I don't think, I mean, the early folks at Safaricom might tell us differently, but I don't think M-Pesa was designed with women in mind. But as you mentioned with the research that you quoted from, it's clearly had tremendous benefits from women. And I'd actually really like to bring us back to that piece of research. And I'd urge everyone, it was, I believe, Science Magazine, December 2018, I want to say, researchers from Georgetown and MIT. And they made a couple of really important observations about M-Pesa specifically, but that I think are very relevant to our conversation. Literally, the last two paragraphs make the point that observing the take-up by women and how, as you mentioned, Christine, the increase in above the poverty line, the ability to move out of subsistence agriculture and become more entrepreneurial, wasn't about getting additional capital. It was being given a tool that gave them more control, that was more flexible, that allowed them to manage their own personal financial lives, separate from their husband, separate from the demands of other members in their family. We hear that so often, and particularly in Africa, where the table banking, the Roscas, merry-go-rounds, Susus, all of those group savings mechanisms, women always have so much pressure from other family members when they save to make gifts, to make loans. So to be able to control her own financial life, that made such a difference. And so I think that may have been, the buried in the other exciting findings in that research. The other thing that research pointed out and has been borne out in many other countries as well, and again, it builds off of some of the things that both Christina and Schaefer have mentioned, given that women still, for all sorts of cultural and social reasons, may not be as mobile as men, may still have the perimeter around which they operate is much more circumscribed. Their financial inclusion through mobile money was dramatically improved with the greater proximity of agents. So basically, more agents, more female inclusion. It made very little difference, actually, in terms of male inclusion, but all the difference in the world for women. And then later research has shown us, not necessarily the piece that we've been speaking about, but that I'm very excited in discovering, that it turns out that women agents, so women within the agent networks of these mobile money providers, are actually much more successful in terms of onboarding both men and women, getting the onboarding clients to then, cross over into actual usage. They're better at cross-selling different products. So if there's a lending product or a savings product or even an insurance product that goes on to the other mobile money, women agents are doing a better job at making that cross-sell. Their balances by women, when there's a woman agent involved, tend to be larger. So you're building a really good case for women sort of on both ends of the transaction for mobile money. And I'm very excited about what that might say for women's labor force participation as mobile money really explodes around the world.
Absolutely. I do want to pick up with you on the subject of the opportunities perhaps in micro insurance, Marielle, but I do want to just read a contribution by Yolanda Pitso, who's talking about common practice in Botswana. She says we have what we call muchelo, and this is common within women, most specifically. This is how women save. So listen up if you want to know how African women are saving money, and Shefa, not if you agree with in terms of that's how it's happening in Kenya as well. So a group of women contribute a specified money to create a pool of money, and at the end of the year, it's shared equally. And Yolanda's pointing out that in Botswana, we're additionally seeing women introduce literacy lessons to these groups, and we're seeing some banks tailor their products to these particular initiatives. There are also other saving initiatives, burial societies as well. So again, to the point, women are saving, but it's just that money isn't being captured by the current financial services products that are on offering. So I wanted to talk about micro insurance. Marielle, if you could unpack that world for us, because we've been talking about mobile money. If we can venture now to what you would understand best, I guess, in terms of the banking, your banking background.
Well, I think it's so, I applaud the fact that you've raised insurance, because it's not always understood that savings is very important. Savings are sort of this natural purview of women in the household. They're saving against emergencies. But when you think about, we found amongst the microfinance institutions and banks that Women's World Banking was working with, that women were saving on average 10 to 15% of monthly income, which is an extraordinary number and a savings rate far beyond anything that you'd see in the developed world. But the principal reason they were saving was against emergencies and very often health emurencies. So if you literally just sort of do the sums on paper, if a woman were to pay a much smaller than 10 to 15% of her monthly income as a premium to an insurer, it's a much sort of better use, more efficient use of capital. And I think we're starting to see some really very clever, very, again, very innovative models of digital microinsurance. There were some not so great ones. I think there were these kind of freemium offers where you get an insurance policy on your phone and then it would, sort of run out and the price would go up, and it wasn't very transparently delivered. But, you've got some models today, I think that are very interesting. People are very used to the cell phone top-up model. And so you're starting to see microinsurance, so very small insurance, but again, to meet health emergencies, to meet, in the agricultural field, if you've got a drought emergency or a flood emergency, you can buy insurance in a package, if you will, the way you buy cell phone time, and then top it up without losing any of the benefit if you let it drop. I think as data has its upsides and its downsides. We know in Europe right now, lots of concern around data privacy. And I don't mean to in any way belittle that, but I think we are seeing with women throughout the global South that this is the first time they get a cell phone in their hand. Their data actually makes them visible and allows products and services that were never available before. The data that's able to be mined through cell phone transactions is far better and far more up to date than any actuarial data that an insurance company would ever have about this population. So I think we've got to make sure that women are being able to benefit from this data revolution while we're protecting them at the same time.
And just coming off the back of that, Christina, I want to bring you back in here now. And let's talk about public-private partnerships in the context of what we're hearing about microinsurance, about the mobile money. What could those partnerships look like? And perhaps do these partnerships also become sort of international partnerships with some of the projects that we know are being rolled out between the two continents in terms of fostering cooperation when it comes to financial inclusion for women as well?
Yeah, from our experience, public-private partnerships play a really important role when it comes to any inclusive business solutions. And I think they are also important of driving home the message with especially large companies that taking a gender perspective is important there. So with the public-private partnership agreements that I know, often it's a matching grant agreement to kind of entice large companies to think about, including low-income populations as consumers or entrepreneurs. Then usually comes the obligation to take a specific gender lens. What I've also seen in these PPPs is that sometimes this is kind of ticked off as a must exercise, and something is entered that is like, oh yeah, we empower women because they have access to light and then they will read at night or whatever. But it's not really taken that seriously. But I think it's a real opportunity also for the companies that go into these PPPs to take it as an opportunity and learn about being gender smart. And I would encourage, I know that there's a lot of people from the public sector here, I would encourage the public sector to be even bolder about this. And with this requirement to be gender smart, also include some technical assistance to help companies become gender smart, because most of them don't have that capacity. They don't even know what does it mean to be gender smart, and how do I approach this new customer group that might already be in a different country, in a different economic category, and then specifically take that women lens to support the companies as part of these public-private partnerships to really be able to take a gender lens, because what we see is that it's not just good for women, it's also really good for business. A lot of these inclusive businesses stay beyond or below their potential because they treat men and women equal, and they don't recognize the specific barriers and constraints that women face. And then they fall short of what they could achieve. So I think here's a real lever for the public sector to drive home gender smartness in new business models.
Absolutely. I mean, and here's something that I read as well, that, I mean, at least this was also in the African context, that a woman seeing a female bank teller, for example, improves the experience. It also, there's something about the trust relationship that can be built. So it also just goes on to be, incorporating more people in that regard. So I did want to follow up with you there, because yes, please jump in.
Jump in for just a second, because Christina's thoughts about the partnership just brought one quick thing on insurance to mind. I don't mean to hijack your question, but there's one partnership that Women's World Banking has been very excited about that's actually has German roots. The Access to Insurance Initiative, which is based within GIZ, has been a great partner for us we have a leadership and diversity program for regulators. So making exactly the point you were about representation and being able to see a more diverse group of people, but this time within regulatory agencies. And Access to Insurance has been a wonderful partner in providing scholarships for insurance regulators who are fairly notoriously very male-dominated, without much of a pipeline of women leaders into our program. So I think it's been a great just a great partnership, but I was reminded of it when you were talking about insurance.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I guess that was the perfect place to put it in there, because Asheka, I do want to come to you now. And Sana in the chat rightly brought up women in the rural context. What do we need to, what kind of mindset do we need to be in when we're thinking about financial inclusion for women in the rural context? Because women are financially excluded in the cities as well, but the rural areas present a particular set of dynamics, perhaps.
Wonderful question. I think we'll go back to the basics of what it means to financially include women in a digitalized world, and understanding what the rural structures lack, or what rural setups lack. So it becomes a multi-sectoral approach, and I'll explain. One is understanding that affordability is a problem, and that as much as we are happy that women can now get on the digital space and do and transact and save and expand their businesses and wonderfulness that comes with it, it's not affordable for most of them in the rural spaces. Because one, being in the rural space means there is less income floating around, there is less business floating around, and then now the money that they're already making, vis-a-vis the fact that women already have to do a myriad of other things, they cannot afford mobile phones that are adequate enough for their participation online or their active engagement. So affordability is one of the things that we need to figure out. How we make it affordable for women to get online, or to get phones that allow them to be online? How are we making the government be able to enhance network connectivity so that we can have penetration in the farthest corners of rural places, right? So that women can be actively connected. How do we educate on literacy and digital skills, particularly on safety? And now that women are online, and these are women who are not necessarily online, and they're just wondering how this gadget that they're holding in their hands knows their name, knows their age, knows where they live, and all these things. So how do we teach digital literacy for these women so that they can be able to not just participate, but participate actively and in a safe manner? And then how do we ensure that they need external structures, the external structures needed, like electricity, mobile penetration, affordable network connection, and when they're buying airtime, or when they're buying bundles, or when they're connecting Wi-Fi, if they get to that level? How do they make sure that all of these things work together to enhance their work, and to make sure that their participation in the digital space is inclusive? Because one thing we shouldn't forget is the fact that what the digital space does, it's just a replica of what's happening offline, right? So because it's not happening in a vacuum, it's still happening within the same societies that uphold structures of inequality, of injustice, of invisibility, of lack of inclusion. Of course, when we move into the digital space, we've just digitalized inequality, injustice, lack of inclusion. We've just moved it, because we are the same human beings who run these spaces, or we're the same human beings who run these gadgets, right? So if we don't reorient, if we don't unlearn, if you're not ready to employ women who understand gender, women who understand feminist lens into these spaces, we'll probably be wondering why there's a woman in a corner who still chooses to not even bother with the phone, because she loves running her business in the corner of the world and not be bothered, right? Because we've not understood the complexities that go into this. We've not understood what it takes from her to be in line. And that because we are not also thinking about what it means and how much time it takes from women, and the work that women are already doing, the care burden work, it is absolutely uncalled for, because it's still not paid work, right? That she has to do that work and still wonder, oh my God, I also have to enter my client's name on my phone. We will be wondering for a while. So we are at a point where it's such a demand, because the world kind of moved into like a digital space. But then a lot of women are still left out of this space because of the factors I have mentioned. So then this is the time we stop talking and start actually doing. We start figuring out how to employ more women, because it is very true that when I go to a bank and I see a female teller or a female person behind a counter, I do feel more included. I just feel a different kind of energy when I go and she serves me. It's like when you take an Uber and there's a female driver. I'm like, okay, this is wonderful, It's a different thing. So then what you realize is that we need Ubers, wherever they are, to employ more women. And them employing more women, they have to make sure that the women that are employing are safe. Because also we understand the issues around safety of women driving around strangers in the world, right? And that we do understand these things. So then how do they start teaching gender responsiveness, progressive gender policies? How do we start having structures that hold the systems accountable? So women are included, but are not included to harm them, but to actually enhance them and make them thrive.
Okay, so I'm looking at the clock, and oh my goodness, we're just about at the end of this. So it's time for our closing remarks, really. And Christina, I want to start with you. And you're going to be giving us your closing remarks, but first you're going to perhaps try to answer this question of when does financial inclusion actually begin, or exclusion for that matter, because we've heard about, financial literacy. We've heard about, things like national identity documents excluding people. So at what stage in a person's life do we say already, if boxes have not been ticked at a certain stage, this person is destined for financial exclusion, if I can almost put it that way. So your closing remarks, Dr. Christina, if you want to maybe take an attempt at that, and then we'll go this way. Christina, Mary Ellen, and then we'll close off with Shefa.
Yeah, that's not an easy question, I would say, and probably Mary Ellen is better placed to answer it. But I would say financial inclusion is not a solution in and of itself. No, it depends on what women can do with that access to credit, access to insurance, or access to savings. So I would encourage to look at this bigger picture, and also, and that can also be my closing remarks, when looking for solutions that empower women, to not think narrowly in silos about, okay, how can I give them access to insurance, or how can I give them access to credit, but also think about what will this woman then do with that credit, and maybe find more comprehensive solution, because women are often stuck in these very complex gridlocks of different challenges. Find solutions that address multiple barriers. And one example that I really like, also picking up on the point around the power of data and having now data on women, is Jaza Duka, also from Kenya, and building on the M-Pesa success. It's a model by MasterCard and Unilever to empower women retailers, or actually all retailers, but a lot of retailers are women, and building on the data on what they buy from Unilever, giving them access to credit. Although they don't have any other kind of collateral, they now have access to credit, and they can have working capital to increase their shops just by virtue of ordering via their phone. And then, of course, they get the credit on their phone. So this is a broader perspective on financial inclusion, where you see the woman entrepreneur and the different needs that woman has. Financial inclusion, but maybe also entrepreneurship support and access to stock and so on. And that then really unlocks more barriers than just the financial exclusion or inclusion barriers. So I would encourage that broader perspective.
Thank you so much for that. And I see you've put something in the link that I'll just to point out to some of our audience members. There is something there for us to take away. Mary Ellen, now is your time.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this conversation, because I felt it was really spot on so many of the issues that are driving issues of women's financial inclusion. But maybe I'll just go back and speak to that specific question you asked, Christine. I mean, at some level, it's never too late for someone to acquire the identification, to acquire an account in her own name. But how wonderful if that can start as early as possible in a young woman's life, and that she could have the identification of her birth, documentation, identification, even if that documentation is digital, that allows her to start to save in her own name. There's some, quite beautiful work that's been done across Africa through the Girl Effect, of girls who are able to save in their own names, so that at the point at which they may have to have that uncomfortable conversation with their families about continuing with school or being taken out of school, they've got money on the table, again, to use that phrase, to negotiate with. And I've just met too many amazing young women across Africa who are talking about saving for their education and saving to contribute to their families, but doing that as early as possible. And there's some fantastic data that we've now been able to collect from banks in Nigeria, that we've worked with, banks in Tanzania that we've worked with, that if you acquire that client as a child, essentially, and they get used to becoming your customer, you've got them for life. And it's a much less expensive proposition to acquire that child client, just speaking in very, gross business terms, when she's a child and then follows you through life. And we've seen lots of examples that this is not a lost leader. This is not a charitable project. But if you think about the lifetime value of that client, of her family, we've seen cases where banks have started girls' savings programs that within 5 years, the entire family has moved all of their financial transactions to that bank, and they are better performers in terms of loans that are taken out, size of balances, size of remittances that are put through the bank than the average clientele is. So there's a real, I think, a really strong case for youth financial inclusion as a builder for lifetime value, both for the financial service provider and for that individual girl.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And given, of course, spot on because of that youth demographic that we have on the continent. And I'll come over to you now, Shefa, because we are running out of time. Goodness, so you take it away now.
Thank you. Such wonderful comments. I don't even want to repeat anything, but there's such delicious things that have been said already. I think one of the things that happens is realizing that we need to teach money literacy early in life, and not just for just women, but for everyone around women, because also women exist within communities and societies that still deny them the ability to be able to save, to invest, to see the value of them having their own money and having financial autonomy. So teaching money literacy is like a fundamental thing as we move forward. I think another thing is just figuring out how we start doing and implementing a bit of this research work that has been done, because one of the things with research is that it will never end. There's always new research coming up every day, and the next one is always the hottest, the greatest, the most crisis creating than the other, and the most alarming. But if we just started using what we already have to build on it, so that we can start growing some seeds of progress and of enhancing and expanding the spaces so women can start getting into financial and digital inclusion much earlier on, so they can teach this and share this information, because one of the things that women do very well is intergenerational sharing of knowledge, of wealth, of ideas, of skills much earlier. I think it will be fantastic. And then lastly, I think all of us need to just remember that we cannot empower women by creating more bureaucracies. So as a point of carrying forward, how do we empower more women by reducing their bureaucracies that already exist, And I know there are multiple fantastic partners who already want to see how, to reduce the bureaucracies that are there. So we can and we should start working with the ones that are there. We can occupy media spaces and start talking about this. We can work with NGOs that are already in these spaces and doing more, and as we formulate and reevaluate policies around this, I think we're in a better place to move women closer to money autonomy and to just have more money in women's pockets.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they are out there, they're doing their thing, partly the reason why they're not on the Zoom call today, because they're out there busy being industrious.
Exactly.
Exactly. And and I told you about Granny, and on days Granny didn't go to the market, guess what she did? She paid somebody else to be there for her. She was now employed.
Exactly. Yep.
All happening in the informal sector. So I think the case is there. African women are there, and we need to come up with policy ideas. We need to come up with products in the financial services space that can better serve them and just bring them into the formal economy. And of course, again, as Marian put it, we are leaving money on the table. If there's anything you want to take away from that, the numbers show it themselves. Thank you so much, ladies. We have to leave it here because it's 5 o'clock on the dot, and we promised that this will go to 5, but no more, at least Berlin time. But again, thank you so much. Christina Tevis-Gradel, you've been here for us here in Berlin. Marian Iskenderun, thank you so much. And of course, Shefa Okore, much, much, much appreciated. At this time, I just want to hand over to Dr. Ingrid Hum to give us some closing remarks. Your takeaway, Ingrid, as we bring this to a close. Ingrid, I have 2 minutes for you, if you wouldn't mind. Just.
Okay, I don't know whether I need really 2 minutes. Many, many thanks to all of you. Great discussion. And the only thing I would like to emphasize after the Generation Equality Forum is proceeding throughout the year, finance is not a top topic on the agenda all the time. So I would like to emphasize that without money, nothing is nothing. So we have to think about financial inclusion very, very deeply. And we got a lot of good ideas we can proceed on. So please, the ones who are driving the Gender Equality Forum, on your agenda, finance inclusion is a priority you should think of. That's what I would like to say at the end of that great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, and see you soon. Keep watching the GPI space. More will be coming your way. Have a wonderful evening, day, morning, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined us today.
Three continents, one afternoon.
Well done.
For women, great. So
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much
much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.